everyone and welcome back to my channel. It feels so weird to be saying that again because it's been months since I've filmed a video, let alone like actually sat down and planned one. And you know, you guys know how busy the doctorate is, and also just life happened. There was a lot of like life changes, and I'm feeling kind of more myself and more able to just like be on camera and be talking to you guys again now that my life is a bit more like under control. So with all that being said, let's get straight into this video. So I put on my Instagram the other day what you guys would want to see, and a lot of you voted for a video about what to do after being rejected from the DClinPsy. Now this video is going to be mainly targeted at people who did an interview and kind of got to that stage and then got rejected. The word rejected sounds so harsh even when I'm saying it, but yeah, it's going to be for those people who got to that stage. Now it's going to be helpful, I think, for everyone, kind of throughout your career as a psychologist, as an assistant. You deal with a lot of rejection, and up until you kind of get onto clinical training, and I mean, I'm hoping there's not too much rejection after you qualify. I'm hoping it's fairly easy to get a job, but we'll see. Anyway, so in today's video we are going to be talking about kind of what happens when you get rejected and maybe what it brings up in you. We're then going to talk about maybe why you got rejected, and then we're going to be talking about what you should then do based on the things that we kind of reflect on together today. Please make sure to give this video a like and subscribe, because I am going to be trying to post more videos more regularly on my channel. So when thinking about a rejection, I almost see it as a loss. It's a loss of opportunity, it's loss of a role that you were really hoping for, and so it's quite helpful to look at it through the lens of almost one of those grief models. So I thought today it would be useful to kind of reflect on the 5 stages of grief, which I'm sure all of you have heard of before, but just to say that obviously you can move through the different stages. It's not kind of one after the other. So I'll pop it up on the screen now, and basically, you know, you've got denial, where you're avoiding, you're a bit confused, you're probably shocked, and then you kind of go into the anger, and then you get onto bargaining, and we're going to return to this a little bit later. And this is where you're going to be, you know, maybe telling your story, actually asking for help, but also trying to find meaning. And then there's kind of a depression where you feel overwhelmed, maybe helpless, and then you slowly move on to the acceptance, where you kind of have a new plan and you're moving on. And again, we're going to come to that later on in the video. And so obviously you can move through these different phases, but I think it's just helpful to bear these different things in mind, that, you know, to normalize these feelings that you might have after being rejected. It is a loss. Be kind to yourself is, I think, the first thing that I would suggest, and just allow yourself to feel all of the emotions, and it's not an overreaction. And I remember when I got rejected, and not even to the interview point, but I just remember feeling so upset and so angry with myself that I couldn't do it, and then I felt even more angry because I was like, this is ridiculous, like it's just an interview and you always have next year and it was your first time applying. But actually it's very normal to go through all of those emotions, anger, depression, when you've lost something that you were really hoping for. So just allow yourself to sit with those emotions. So when you're at the point of bargaining, you're going to be thinking about why did I get rejected? You're going to be trying to make sense of the situation itself. And so when I was planning for this video, I was thinking, you know, why do people get rejected from the DClinPsy? Obviously there isn't a lot of places, and so the norm is to be rejected, and we need to remember this. Like, you're part of the majority when you're getting rejected. And so that's one of the reasons that there's not enough spaces for all of the incredible aspiring psychologists out there. The other thing that comes to mind is, oh, I didn't do very well in the interview, I didn't perform well. And I think with that, you've kind of got 2 things that might be going on. You might be struggling with, you know, just managing your nerves, but then on the other hand, you might be struggling to reflect on all of your lovely experiences and bring that to the interview in a way that shows that you're a good candidate for training. So if we think about the nerves part first, how are you going into your interview? Are you in a calm mindset? probably unlikely, I do get it, but are you managing your nerves on the day of the interview? And now obviously if you've been rejected this year, you've got a whole year to prepare for this, but try and put yourself in uncomfortable situations and try and put yourself in anxiety-provoking situations so that you can practice managing that anxiety ready for your next interview next year. So for me in the interview, I made sure that before every question I took a deep breath, and I also wiggled my toes so that I could be grounded in my space, and for me that really helped. I've also been kind of put through loads of different anxiety-provoking situations growing up. I used to be kind of in musical theatre and a lot of performing, dance shows, the whole lot, and so it was really important for me throughout life to kind of get those nerves under control. So from those experiences I was able to draw on that and was able to have different rituals that kind of got me in the space. And so prior to kind of any big nerve-wracking event, I will always kind of sit with myself for a few minutes, give myself a little bit of a pep talk, and then also say a little prayer, and that tends to kind of calm my nerves. And so yeah, just figure out what works best for you in terms of managing those nerves and anxiety, and then practice it constantly prior to the interview so that you're ready when that time comes. Now the other part that I think about when things may have not gone so well during your interview is your ability to reflect. Your nerves will be impacting this massively, but are you presenting your experiences in a way that are, one, understandable, but also in a way that really showcases how much you know? So when you're reflecting in DClinPsy interviews, you need to be making those theory practice links. So when they're maybe asking you a question where you're able to reflect on a case and an experience, you need to think, okay, right, what theory links to this? So let's take, for example, how I've used the model of grief for this video. So I'm talking about my experiences of being really angry, feeling quite low, and also trying to make sense of it. And I've used a model to hang these ideas onto, and that's what you kind of need to be doing in a doctorate interview. You also need to be reflecting in a way that is more systemic. So you need to be having a wider lens on things. So it's all well and good you talk about how you found a particular piece of work quite challenging for X and Y reason, because of maybe your own skills, because of the service that you're in, but actually what's happening in the context of the NHS? How is funding impacting your relationship with your client in terms of how fast you need to work with them? And when I'm saying this, I'm thinking about, you know, we're under time pressure, so are we actually allowed space to build rapport with our clients in a realistic way, or does it feel quite forced and does it feel quite rushed? So I think reflecting on those wider factors are really important. In terms of preparing and practicing reflection prior to your interview, I would definitely be, for me, I like writing, and obviously I like kind of practicing things out loud. So I would be using my reflective journal. I would be using kind of, when I was practicing for my interview and preparing, I'd be walking around my room saying things out loud, saying my reflections out loud. Now I do have templates that I've made to aid reflection, but I tend to use the model what, so what, now what, and I've made loads of videos about this kind of, about how I use this model, so please check that out. I won't go into it today, or otherwise check out my Etsy store, the link will be down below. The templates are only £2.99, and if you're struggling financially, then please let me know and I'll be happy to kind of send them to you. So it is about the preparing for your reflections. There's no point going in with loads of different cases and then having really shallow reflections on them. I would say bring in 2 to 3 cases and have really deep, well thought out reflections, and make sure you practice these reflections beforehand. So maybe another thought you might have about why you got rejected is that you don't have the experience, you don't have enough experience, you don't have a variety of experience. And so the logical thing to do, right, is after being rejected is to get more experience or to get more varied experience. Which, yeah, makes sense. But how do you actually do that when AP jobs are so hard to come across, and it can feel really difficult? So what I would suggest is that, I know in the past there has been kind of a lot of thought around, you know, getting loads of experience in different services as an AP so that you're working with different populations. I am not personally too keen on this idea. I think it's probably more beneficial for you to have a depth of experience, good quality experience in 1 or 2 services, because as you work for longer in a service, the more responsibility you get, the more you know the service itself. So what I would suggest, if it was me, I would probably stay in the same service, right? And I'm thinking if you've been there for a year or 2, then stay in the same service and speak to your supervisor and reflect on what parts you need to develop. So have a little look at the 9 competencies of a trainee clinical psychologist, and no, you don't need to be aiming for all of these, because obviously that's what you would achieve on training. But have a think about what people gain through training and how you can set yourself up to be in a better position to get those competencies while on training. So if I'm looking back to my AP days and thinking about what I could have done with more of prior to training, I would say more working with families, more group working, and also more kind of research experience. So for me in my situation then, I would have said, hey, I'd really like to get onto training, and I know this year maybe I didn't have the right experience or enough varied experience, so please can we think about this in the year to come? I'd really like to work on these things. Best case scenario, and I hope this is the scenario for you, your supervisor will be like, yes, I'm going to back you, like let's set this up properly. Some other supervisors are less on it. You know, clinical psychologists are very busy, they've got a lot on their plate, but they should also be prioritising their supervisees. But don't be afraid to chase people, all right? Like, don't be afraid to have it as an agenda point every supervision. And even if maybe you don't have the capacity to do group work in your service, maybe speak to your supervisor about how we can reflect on it in supervision, and also thinking creatively about how you might get the competencies that you would get from group work in a different way. So things like collating information, disseminating information in a way that's accessible to people who aren't professionals, you know? Now, if you're in a service where the scope of work is very limited, say for example you're in a memory assessment service, and so therefore your job is to do memory assessments and maybe write a report, and that's it, then I would maybe say, okay, maybe it is time to look at a different role, because you will want to have some more therapeutic skills and not just assessments. So then go out and look for a new job, and again, be kind to yourself, take your time, but also think broadly. It doesn't have to be an assistant psychologist job. Could you be working for a third sector organisation? Could you be doing some research experience as a research assistant? And maybe think about, if you haven't already, getting some frontline experience with the person. It's not a step back to kind of go into care work if you've been working as an AP. Some of my most valuable experience came from being an ABA tutor, being a healthcare assistant, and I reflected on some of those things in my interview. And there's a couple of people who are on my course at the moment who never worked as an assistant psychologist or a research assistant. They were actually working as healthcare assistants and support workers. And so it just shows you that it's not about your job role, it's about the experience you gain and what you learn, kind of, that will put you in a better place for training. And if there are any videos related to jobs and experience that you'd like to see, please let me know down below, because I'd be down to do that. And I think for me personally, research experience was something that I was lacking in, and so even though I would have probably really hated it, doing a research assistant role would have been so useful, like so useful for where I am now in terms of thesis. And you know, I am struggling with my thesis. It's really difficult for me because I don't have that research experience. Another thing that you could do in terms of improving your experiences and skills is to do a course. You could go and do a master's, you could maybe do a short online course. There are loads of things out there. Now I know for me personally, maybe I could have done a master's, but I would have been at a loss. And an online course I had to pay outright for, I just probably wouldn't be able to do it. Now if I was maybe stuck in an AP role for a few years, then maybe I would have kind of started saving up and thought about what courses I could do. Because that's probably a really good way of upskilling and making you more of a valuable candidate for training. Now on the note of courses, after you've been rejected from the DClinPsy, I think it's a really good opportunity for you to reflect on why you want to be a clinical psychologist and why you don't want to be something else in the psychology field. Things like PWPs, CAPS, even counselling psychology. Now I know the reason why clinical psychology appeals to a lot of people is because we don't have to pay for the course, and that's a really important thing to factor in. things like PWP and things like CAPS, you don't have to pay for your course either. And it might be that you can go into one of these roles first, stay in it for a few years due to kind of the way the HEE funding works. You have to stay in these roles for X amount of time before applying to the doctorate now. So bear that in mind. But it might be a good way to work in a psychological way, but just not be a clinical psychologist yet. You've got your whole working career to get onto the doctorate. In my course, we have people in their kind of mid-40s, I believe, doing their training. And so, you know, time is not going to run out. You can get onto training at some point. There's also things like EMHPs, which are educational mental health professionals, I believe, and those people work in schools. And again, it seems like a really cool job, which I didn't know about and I wish I did. So if it would be helpful, actually, one of my friends on my course, it was an EMHP, and so maybe I could invite her on to have a little chat about that role. So please, again, let me know down below. And the final thing that I want to talk about is maybe next time you need to apply to different courses. So as we know, when you apply to the doctorate, you're trying to match your values with the values of the course, right? You're trying to find the perfect course for you. And so when you get rejected, I think it's really good to think about whether the course was a good fit for you, right? So that can be something that you can do after you get rejected from an interview, is reflect on, right, did I actually like the people on the panel? Did I like the interview procedure? Did I like what they asked me in the interview? Was it relevant to me and what I think is important for a trainee clinical psychologist, right? For me, when I did my interview, I was so pleased with the majority of the processes. Don't get me wrong, I didn't enjoy kind of the maths and English test because I personally found that quite tricky and didn't really see the utility of it at that point, but I'm sure there is a reason. Now for me, when I did my interview, it really solidified why I was choosing that course, luckily. And I know this wouldn't be the case for all of the places I interviewed at. Say for example, and I was debating it for a long time, I was debating applying to UCL because it was a London uni and I'm from London. But imagine if I got an interview there and it was all research based and it was all and it wasn't kind of reflective in the way that my uni now is. I don't think I would have enjoyed the course and I probably wouldn't have got on, right? But because the interview process was in line with my values, I was able to excel. And so just think about that as well. Did you not get on because actually the uni isn't a good fit for you? So try and recall how you felt during the interview, whether you were able to relate to the people, whether the questions you were asking, maybe would you ask them to a future trainee clinical psychologist? So I think that's really valuable to reflect on. And I think doing all of these different things, it highlights how not getting onto a course isn't just kind of on you. There are so many different factors that go on before the interview, during the interview, that kind of push the direction of the decision. So firstly, just to remind you, okay, yes, it could have been the way you performed on the day, it could have been your nerves, you might not have had the right experience, you maybe just messed it up, maybe you're having an off day, again, absolutely fine. Maybe that was it, maybe it was you. But also you have to take into account that there's not enough spaces to get onto training. It's the norm to not get on. You have to remember that all of the people who have their interviews are going to have very similar experiences to you. So by the end of the day, it's going to be down to who's interviewing you as well. It's also going to be down to whether that uni is a good fit for you. Do your values match? So I'm hoping that by reflecting on all of these different things, you're going to have different avenues of which you can kind of go down in what to do now after being rejected. But I think the most important thing is to hold on to the fact that it is normal. It is more likely that you will be rejected from the doctorate than it is for you to get on. And you have to be kind to yourself for this reason. Practice that self-compassion. Give yourself a pat on the back. Have a break from psychology. Lord knows that many a time I've had to have a break from psychology. For example, this YouTube, I had to have a break for a little while because my life felt so entrenched and so dictated by psychology, and it should not be that way. Focus on the other bits of life that you enjoy. Focus on the other parts of your identity as well. You're not just an aspiring psychologist, you're also a sister, a mother, a dog mum, a friend, a partner. You're all of these things and so much more. And just remember that. If you have any questions, then please leave them down below in the comments. I'm probably more likely to reply to comments on YouTube than I am on Instagram DMs, because there are just quite a few. Like I said before, if you like this video, then please give it a like and drop me a comment down below if you have any questions or recommendations for future videos. And until next time, guys, I will see you later. Bye.
Feeling good today.